I call the meeting of the Banner Historic Preservation Commission to order. Could we have roll call, please?
Okay, Scott Dustin. Here. Ken Shepherd.
Here.
Allison Novak.
Here.
Kim Smith.
Here.
Jan Padusa.
Here.
David Stabler.
Here.
Mark Metcalf.
Here.
We have a quorum. Everybody's here. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our meeting from September 3rd. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes?
If none, then I'd move that we approve the minutes as drafted.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Shepherd and seconded by Ms. Smith. Any other comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The minutes are approved as presented. Thank you. We have no written communications. Next item on the agenda is audience participation. Does anybody in the audience wish to participate? Okay. Next item is continued public hearings. We have none. No old business. And the next item is new public hearings. Because I have a conflict of interest with the case, I am turning over the chair temporarily to our Vice Chair, Kim Smith.
Public hearing is now open for case number HP 2014L01, request by Robert Nemeth for the historic landmark nomination of the Zeta Tau Alpha Sorority House located at 1404 South Lincoln Avenue. At the property owner's request and in accordance to the Historic Preservation Ordinance, the hearing will, it shall be continued to our next regular meeting on December 3rd.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is new business. We have an update on the Historic Preservation Commission's official bylaws, and Kevin Garcia will present.
I'll try to keep this pretty brief. Basically, we are proposing changes to the Historic Preservation Commission bylaws to reflect some provisions of the Open Meetings Act for the state of Illinois regarding public participation. And in the current bylaws, we don't have any section that really regulates the audience participation section or section of the public meetings. So we are proposing to add that. And you will have received a memo from last week, and we would be adding Article 7. This is the major change with three subsections regarding audience participation. I can answer any questions about those. In addition to those major or somewhat major changes, I guess, there were just some minor typos that were corrected, and then there's also a provision to remove the requirement for our annual certified local government reports to include meeting minutes. I was informed by the Illinois Historic Preservation Association that is no longer a requirement. So you have the revisions to the bylaws in front of you. I'll conclude my report with that. We would recommend that you adopt the attached revised bylaws. Thanks.
Are there any questions for Kevin? Comments?
I had one little bitty thing in the preamble, and this doesn't have anything to do with substance, but just in case it might help people reading further, in your V, no member of the board, commission, or committee which receives public input is obligated to respond to anything contained in a person's public input. I think we needed just one more word in there. Other than that, I read through everything, and I think it looks great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So do we need a motion to accept if no one has any other comments?
Do you know?
Yeah, I actually had a comment. I know that, and it has nothing to do with the changes proposed. I think those are fine. But under Article 6, number 4, it does state that the nominator or petitioner shall present evidence at the hearing. So I know that we had a case last year where the nominator actually wasn't here and somebody else was offered as a designee. So I'm just wondering if we should add that to this, to make that really clear, because I think that was a bone of contention with the opponent in that the nominee was not here to give evidence, and they did not have the opportunity to question the specific nominee. And without it saying here that it could be the nominee or their designee, I think we may open ourselves up to something. So I was just thinking that if we're going to change this, and that is a possible bone of contention, maybe we should do it all at once.
I think that's a great catch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the case that you're referring to, and you described it very well. Whether that gets into something about the philosophy of the way the HPC runs that we need to, mill around on a little bit, I don't know. Or just, did you have a suggestion to the wording that you wanted to bring forward, or?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I just really wanted to open it up for discussion. I didn't know if we all kind of felt that that might be something we wanted to look at, or if we felt that it was okay as is. Also, as part of the zoning ordinance, I think the wording is exactly the same. Yeah, in the zoning ordinance, I don't know, under the review process part, it says, at the public hearing, the Preservation Commission shall take comments. Hang on. I'm sorry. I think I got the wrong one. But I thought I read the exact same thing in that we would hear from the nominator, and the nominator shall. So I just thought I'd bring it up and just see what everybody else thought.
Jeff?
Yeah, just a little clarification, or to let you guys know, we actually have marked that as an update that we are going to make that change in the zoning ordinance. We've been waiting for, we usually do an annual review and update of the zoning ordinance, but we haven't done that in some time, but it's on the list of things that we're going to be updated. So that is a good catch, though.
And it'll be updated to include wording, something like what Gina suggested,
Yeah.
nominee or designee.
Yes, exactly.
Do you recommend that we wait to make the bylaws change then until the zoning ordinance has been changed?
It might be better or cleaner to wait so the zoning ordinance does match the bylaws.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
Remind me, in that other case, there was somebody that spoke for the nominator, is that right?
Well,
I
the
don't-
nominator had moved out of town and
remember
was living
that.
in Washington
I
or
remember she
something
was
like
gone.
that, and couldn't get back to
Yeah.
represent the petition, essentially, during the public
But
hearing.
did we have somebody that spoke for her or anything like that, or?
Not that I
can't quite
recall,
remember.
staff may have been put in the, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
Rebecca read it, right?
Right,
Yeah.
and I think
Okay.
that it was kind of offered that there was someone here if there were any questions.
mhm.
But really, nothing really came of that.
And then if we're gonna put in something about a designee, then is our opponent's gonna be questioning the designee? And
Mm-hmm.
So
Mhm.
is that in another place that we need to change something, that opponents shall have a reasonable,
So number 3, talking about outlining the nature of the request, that it is the nominator, petitioner, or his or her representative.
Oh, yeah.
So
it's got
has-
I wonder if we've got a couple places to,
Mhm.
Right, because that says
doctor
may
up.
make a statement. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean they have to, but the shall in number
Yes.
4 is
Yeah.
what's bugging me.
mhm.
Usually, in my mind, shall is, it will happen. And then there was one other thing on number 18 in that same section. It does say that we have the right to push off a meeting if the petitioner can't be here. So I just wanted to also bring that to everybody's attention, too. That we could actually postpone in the absence of a petitioner.
I don't know how that works within the regulations of, are we limited, Jeff, on how long we can continue a public hearing?
Well, the regulations state that you need to open the hearing within 60 days. I don't think you need to make a decision, though, within that 60 days.
I could look that up really quick.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, if realistically, we're kind of limited on how much we can delay meetings, but, yeah.
Right, I just saw it as,
Mhm.
part of the bylaws as saying that,
Yeah.
we do have the authority to push it off if the petitioner can't be here.
I'm just wondering if we are going to change 4 somehow, that if we ought to, in 4A, where the opponents can question the nominator/petitioner, I think we need to
Or
change that too in some
designate,
way.
mhm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you can just drop that language from 3 down into that
Mhm.
section.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and there may be, I don't know if it shows. Okay, so we need to probably revisit this whole thing just to make sure it all
Mhm.
matches. Okay.
Okay, but we're in agreement that we're going to wait until the zoning ordinance has been changed to make that consistent.
Okay.
Did you have something?
I was just going to read what this says about the review process. It says the Preservation Commission shall commence a public hearing on the question of designation within 60 days of receiving a complete application.
Mhm. Okay.
So no upper limit is given, or least that you're finding now, yeah.
No.
I have a quick question about number 10. Under the general provisions, is that in reference to the Open Public Meetings Act for the state of Illinois about commissioners meeting? And if so, should we include that by reference?
I'm sorry, what section? was
Under
that?
Article 10, general provisions, the commissioner shall not communicate with other commissioners outside of Historic Preservation Commission's meetings for the purpose of influencing such commissioners to adopt a position on a matter then pending or reasonably expected to come before the commission.
Yeah, that's open meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we include a reference to that? We refer in other places here to other Illinois case law.
Yeah, you could include that reference.
I assume we'd want to align with whatever the state of Illinois mandates, right?
Yeah, that would be appropriate.
Okay, so back to what we have at hand here. I'd like to entertain a motion to accept the staff proposal for the amendments to the bylaws.
So moved?
Do we have a second?
Second?
Okay, moved by Mr. Dossett, seconded by Mr. Metcalf. Any discussion on what's left? Okay, I think just to play it safe, we're going to do a roll call vote. Christopher?
Scott Bassett,
Yes.
Ken Shepherd,
Yes.
Alice Novak,
Yes.
Kim Smith,
Yes.
Gino Paluso,
Yes.
David Saylor,
Yes.
Matt Metcalf,
Yes.
Okay, the bylaws changes pass unanimously. Thank you. Next item is monitoring of historic properties. Do you have anything, Jeff?
Just a quick update. We did some drive-bys of properties that recently obtained certificates of appropriateness. So, the 504 West Elm property received a certificate of appropriateness to rebuild the rear porch, and that work is still under progress. Most of the structural work is done there, though pretty much all the wood is installed. I think it's just they need to do painting mostly, and also add the handrails to the stairs. And there was a question at the last meeting about the Royer House being sold. We'd looked that up. It was sold to a local developer, Chris Saunders. He's a pretty good landlord, so we're confident that he'll treat the property well.
Is that Saunders, Saunders.
Yes.
Okay, I've never heard of that person, but I wish them well with it.
Mhm.
Okay.
And then generally, we don't monitor ownership changes for local landmarks, I guess, do we, or?
No, we don't, no.
But they would know that on the, that's deed recorded, right? So they would know that in the property transaction, so,
Yes.
okay. Any other monitoring?
I've got a question. At the last meeting, we were informed that a certificate of appropriateness had been issued for front wing wall, well, at 810 West Main, replacement of front wing walls, concrete steps and sidewalk. And then here it says that the work had not yet been started. Did you notice what was going on there, if that was finished, or where we are on that one?
Actually, I forgot to mention that one. We
Okay.
stopped by and they had not started. It looks like they won't be able to start this season. They'll be
Okay.
aiming for the spring.
And are the certificates of appropriateness, are they good for a long period or indefinitely? I don't remember that one.
I'll need to double check that.
Okay.
I think there might be, if there is a limit, it might be a 1-year
Okay.
limit.
Do you remember?
I don't remember. I don't remember that there is a limit. But then they would be
Right.
limited by, do they need a building permit for something like that? So,
Yes.
and how
Okay.
long does the building permit last?
There's a limit on that, but,
I don't recall.
yeah.
A year, probably. Okay. Okay. Any other monitoring issues? Do we have a staff report?
I guess one quick update I could give is we are considering applying for a CLG grant. The application deadline is next week. So we're looking into ideas to kind of continue the work we've done with the previous grants, with the podcasts and website of the 100 most significant properties in Urbana. So one of the things we're looking at is an update or an app, a mobile app and a website that would show all of those properties and would link to those podcasts and have information on all those properties.
Great. Bravo. Okay. Any questions of staff? No? Okay, next item on the agenda is the study session, and today we have Brian Adams here to talk about his research that he's developed on 208 West Griggs Street. Thank you. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Well, got involved in some research a while ago, actually, on a building in Urbana. I'll give you a little preface. It's kind of a story in a story, but I had adopted a dog from a humane society a couple of years ago, and that resulted in me taking a lot more extended walks through Urbana. And one of those walks took me down Griggs Street quite often, and I noticed a big white building right there by the Boneyard Creek where they're doing the beautification project. And it seemed to be an amalgamation of structures, but there seemed to be a core building that looked relatively old, even though it had been upgraded over the years. So I decided just to do a little bit of research, and that's the results I have here tonight. So I just thought I'd share those with you. And I thought it was an interesting piece of Urbana history that's still around. Again, it's not the most beautiful building in the world, but I think it's the location is interesting now, given the Boneyard beautification project. So, let's see. Oh. Okay, so again, it turns out this building was a foundry. It was built around 1872, and it's located there, again, right there on Griggs Street by the beautification project on the Boneyard. Doing some research, I was able to find out that it was built in 1872 by an individual named Abraham Snedeker. It was called the Abram Snedeker Iron Foundry. And there was a little announcement in the Champaign County Gazette that mentioned that he'd come from Pekin to Urbana to establish this foundry. I couldn't find out a whole lot more about him. He eventually sold it off to somebody else, who I'll talk about in a minute. But all I could find out was that he took trips out to Pennsylvania and to Georgia and ultimately moved to Georgia. But he was the one that actually built the foundry, the original building. I don't have any images or maps of what it looked like, but that, again, it goes back to 1872, and he owned it through 1881. He sold the foundry to a guy named Thomas Wright. He was an Englishman, born in England in 1828. He worked as a groom and as a saddler in England, and eventually got married, and they moved here to Champaign County around 1880. 1881, Wright purchased what by then was known as the Enterprise Foundry from Abram Snedeker. Wright owned it until about 1900, and he died in 1914. So what I did was I went to some of the Sanborn fire insurance maps, and the only image I could find of the foundry when Thomas Wright owned it was the image on the left there from the late 1800s. You can see it's sort of an amalgamation of a couple of buildings. The building in the lower right-hand corner, the machine shop, that's one that I think you should keep an eye on, because that's one that's going to eventually be incorporated into one of the structures that you can still see there today. But it consisted of a pattern shop, a shed, the machine shop, and the actual foundry itself, which was the bigger rectangular part on the upper right-hand side of the complex. And going through some of the archival information in the Urbana Free Library, I was able to find some letterhead with Wright's name and giving the name of the foundry at that time, the Enterprise Foundry. And looking through Champaign-Urbana, again, my dog is helping me to document this. It gives me something to do. But I've noticed all over town in Champaign-Urbana, there's still a lot of products that Wright produced back in the late 1800s. They're still in use. They're still functioning. There's cistern lids. The one in the upper, it's kind of hard to see, but it's stamped with his name. The upper left-hand right cistern lid is still in use today. And on the right and the bottom two images are a sewer cover in Champaign, again, still stamped with his name. So these are very durable products that he was producing. They're still in use today.
Ryan, what's the bottom left one? It just says Wright and Son, just like...
T. Wright and Son.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I see the Son part and the T.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
It's kind of hard to get them to stand out. And some of them, again, some of them are in really good shape. The writing is really well preserved on them. Wright sold the foundry in 1903 to a guy named Levitt, H.W. Levitt, who was from Tuscola. He had run a machine shop in Tuscola, but eventually relocated here in Urbana, and he bought the foundry from Thomas Wright, and was soon contracted by the Big Four, which had the roundhouse and all the railroad facilities right there on just off of University by where the Schnuck store is, and they had hired him to start producing products for the trains and for engine castings, those sorts of things, and he was producing structural iron and steel. So right away he was really going into business big time. picture on the right shows a picture of Levitt from the Courier from 1905, shortly after he bought it. And then on the left, there was I found an article that talks about how Levitt had purchased the old Wright factory and just sort of talking it up to get business up, people to come over and check out the foundry. Of course, there's a Royer connection. Right after Levitt purchased the building, he hired Royer to update it and modify it. And I'll show you in a couple of minutes some of the Sanborn maps. You can see the kind of work that Royer did, at least the footprint of the building. So this is again how the foundry looked when Wright owned it. By this time, 1892, it's listed as abandoned, but you can see it's still kind of a loose cluster of buildings. Again, on the right-hand cluster, the very lower part where it says machine shop, that's one of the buildings that Royer modified extensively, I believe, and that's one that it's the most prominent building that you can still see when you go by the building today.
Is Griggs Street, is it down there where it says siding?
Yeah, yeah, that's Griggs Street down there, and then the railroad tracks are still there to the north of the foundry.
So north is up.
North is up,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
So this is 1909, the Sanborn fire insurance map. This is right after Levitt had Royer update it and modify it. And you can see the machine shop. It's in the lower right-hand corner, just on Griggs Street, how that particular building has expanded. It's the only two-story structure in the whole complex. But what it looks like he did was he sort of tied all of the individual structures into one large complex of buildings. And on the right, you can see the boneyard, the curve of the boneyard that's currently being modified or beautified. Okay. So just as a comparison, on the left is how the foundry was just before Royer and Levitt got to it, and on the right, it's how it changed after and how it evolved after the Royer remodel. So Levitt basically was in the building from 1903 to about 1956. The image on the left is from a newspaper article, and that is the building that Royer expanded. It's the two-story structure that was the pattern shop. I think that's where they would, if you wanted something, you could go in there and they would show you, these are the type of cistern lids we can make for you, et cetera. So that building is still there today, even though it's you really have to look hard to pull out some of the details. So that would be looking towards the northwest from the Adult Education Center, I believe. Couldn't find any images of the interior of the foundry while it was up and running, but I did track down some photos of contemporary foundries of the time just to give some sense of what it was like in there. It was probably very dirty, very smoky. One of the descriptions says that the actual foundry part had an earthen floor, so it didn't even have a concrete floor. It was just a building with a dirt floor. And Levitt was really a good businessman. I mean, he was producing materials and products that were being shipped all over the world, to New Zealand, Cuba, Haiti. You can see some of the places listed there. He got an order from New York for 15,000 lawnmowers, which the demand exceeded the supply. He had to go into hire more people just to keep up for the demand. In the 1920s, the company had branch offices throughout the United States and abroad. So it was really a large-scale operation. You wouldn't know it today to walk by that building. It's kind of an ugly building at this point. So they made more than just cistern lids, and they made a lot of agricultural products, with the window weights. If you've got an old house with the window weights, they made the window weights. They repaired engines. They did almost everything that you could do at a foundry. And here's some examples of cistern tops. So you've probably seen these around Champaign-Urbana. They're stamped with the company's name and the model number. In this case, That's the model number 20 cistern, safety cistern top. And if you go through the old newspapers from the time, Levitt always had several ads for products in there. This is one thing I always notice a lot on houses around town, these old coal chutes. And there's one on the left from a house pretty close to the foundry, and then the advertisement from the paper with the identical product indicated. These are some sewer grates in Champaign. They're stamped Levitt Manufacturing Company, Urbana. And this is in a relatively recent neighborhood from the 20s or 30s, so they were still producing products at that time. A manhole cover in Champaign, Levitt Manufacturing Company. And again, these are just some of the multitude of products that they made: fire escapes, sash weights for windows. And one thing that they were really proud of was it's the product on the lower right. It's called a cattle dehorner. But this is one of the most popular products that the foundry produced, the cattle dehorner or the bull dehorner. They were producing almost 2,000 of these by 1906 for distribution throughout the world. And they were very proud of it. They usually had an ad every week in the paper talking about how good their cattle dehorner is. And I went online and I actually found the patent that Levitt submitted for the cattle dehorner. You can see it on the left. And on the right is an actual one that you can find them on eBay today. People still collect them and sell them. I don't know how you use them, but they look pretty mean. Around 1911, the Levitt Company got into the sporting supply business. They started to produce baseball bats, javelins, discus, in cooperation with Harry Gill of the University of Illinois. He was a coach at the University of Illinois, so they really expanded their product line. And one product that they became very well known for were called knockdown portable bleachers. And we've probably all seen these, but basically these are bleachers that you can set up really fast to expand the seating capacity of a sporting event. They were actually invented by an athletic director at the University of Chicago, and George Huff down here at the U of I saw the benefit, and he approached the Levitt Company and said, could you imitate these? Could you make bleachers for us? And they actually did, and they started to produce them around 1910. Again, it was another very successful item. They were producing 200,000 of them per year, and by the 20s, that was really the largest division of the foundry. And the name changed subsequently from the Levitt Foundry to the Levitt Bleacher Company, and in 1956 it was sold and the name was changed to the Skill Built Products Company. And I just found this was kind of fascinating that they had sold bleachers that were installed in Soldiers Field that could hold over like 50,000 people, and they compare it to the bleachers that were installed at the boardwalk in New Jersey. So, again, a pretty successful product. And then these are just some ads for their sporting goods. Big ad for the knockdown bleachers. And so today, what does it look like today? Well, I was saying before, it's kind of a building you can go by, you can walk by and not really notice it. But on the right is the aerial view of the building. To the right of the big rectangle, you can see the curve of the boneyard as it's being modified. But if you look kind of in the lower left-hand side of the building, there's a rectangular section, and that's the two-story pattern building that Royer expanded. And that's probably the most prominent part of the complex today if you go by it. That's the one thing that really resembles the original complex. And so here we can see on the left is how that complex of buildings looks today. They've covered up or bricked up all the original windows, but if you go by it and look very carefully, you can still see the old arched windows. It's expanded obviously over time as the business grew. But if you look at the on the right-hand image, that's the pattern shop, and you can see how it still vaguely resembles the condition it's in today. And so I was out there recently, and I noticed that they had painted the east wall of the complex blue as part of the Boneyard beautification project. And then last August, I'd come across this article in the News Gazette that Glenn Davies may be painting a mural on the building, and this was one of the concepts that was presented, sort of a nature scene. And I was just wondering out loud, why not commemorate the foundry by including that somehow in this image? But that was just me thinking out loud. So, just in summary, the foundry was started in 1872 by Abram Snedeker. It was owned by the Englishman Thomas Wright and Son as the Enterprise Foundry between 1881 and 1903. After that, it was taken over by H.W. Levitt of Tuscola, and it was in business through the 1950s, ultimately becoming a bleacher and sporting goods company. And then, just in conclusion, it's almost 140 years old. It's probably, I could be wrong on this, but it could be one of the oldest surviving industrial complex from the 19th century in Urbana. So, anyway, those are my findings, and I just thought I'd share those with you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
That was great.
Pardon?
It was great.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
What's going on there today?
I
Anything?
think it's it was just bought, and part of it's being rented by, was it the food bank, or was it the food bank that was in there?
Food bank used to be in there, I think.
They used to be
yeah.
in there. I know the east part, I've gone by there and there's been activity in there. I think there's a for rent sign on the west side of the building. So some of it's rented for something.
I think there is a new owner, and they are trying to develop it with some more active uses, but they haven't figured out what exactly yet.
I
Yeah,
thought your idea was great, too, about having them commemorate the foundry and its history, so
Yeah.
that people can see it broadly.
that's what I thought, given all the work they're putting into the boneyard right there, that it really is looking nice there. It would be kind of a nice tie-in to, this was an important part of Urbana's history. And again, the way the building is today, you kind of walk by it, and I know I'd walked by it a million times, and I never even gave it a second look.
It'd even be great to see an interpretation of how the building looked in some of those older
Yeah,
line art drawings.
yeah, I think that'd be really nice. It'd be really nice. I actually did contact the, because when they published that picture of the mural that they want Glenn Davies to do, it mentioned who owned it, who the new owner was, and I remember contacting him, and he was interested in the history, and I kind of threw that out there. Would it be kind of interesting to include an image of the foundry? And I didn't really get any response from him, but it might be worth working on him.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Any other questions?
Brian, thanks. I think that was really great piece of research. I actually read a lot of this in the Packet newsletter a few months back.
Oh, did they publish it?
Oh,
they
yeah.
did. Mhm.
Oh, they did. 'Cause
About 2 months ago.
Yeah, uh-huh.
And the whole issue was you, man.
Yeah, it
they
was.
published this.
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I sent it into them as a manuscript, and I never heard back from
I
them.
received one at my home.
I did too. Yeah,
Oh,
and when I
okay.
was walking around the boneyard, I used that.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's news to me.
Yeah.
And I have one of those cistern covers in my yard.
Oh, there you go.
Wow. Well, great.
Thanks, Brian.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I just take this out. Thanks for letting me talk.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your info. Enjoy those dog walks. Any announcements from anybody?
I'd like to just throw out that and you probably saw this at some point on October 10th, the Legacy Tree Program dedicated a new 150-year-old tree in town, and I just thought it was really neat. As the Historic Preservation Commission, we look at a lot of the built environment, but we have some of the natural environment too here that's being recognized. So thank you to the Urbana City Council for setting that up. I think that's really, really neat, and if anyone's watching this or hears it, Mike Brunk is the arborist, so get in contact with him if you see any of those big old trees that deserve to be recognized.
Thank you.
And Mike Brunk reached out to me, part of an organization that I'm in, that they're actually looking for people to scout around like you said, scout around for trees that people may not know about, so.
It was kind of neat. I found it on Google. I was showing my mom around town,
Yeah.
and
The
it
legacy
says big
tree.
old tree, yeah. So it's neat that it kind of made it up there pretty quickly after that.
So he's trying to recruit people to be scouts for him.
Okay.
So.
Great, thank you. Any of the other announcements? No? Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Sure.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. We're adjourned. Thank you.